So if you're looking at those comparisons, for them to be valid, you have to assume that the number of infractions in Canada is the same as in the US in proportion. And that's not a proven fact. Okay? As a matter of fact, let's take it this way. There's 1.6 million adults in prisons in the US. There's 33,000 in Canada. Now, are our cities more dangerous than in the US? So that ratio alone doesn't tell you what the story is. It assumes also that the regulatory agencies are not focused on trying to prevent things to happen as opposed to correcting them or punishing after the fact. The other point that needs to be viewed very clearly is that the securities regulators have administrative, civil, and penal offenses per se, or in terms of what they can do. Criminal is out of the Securities Commission. It's the Attorney Generals, it's the police, and in Canada, with the amendments that were brought to the Criminal Code, the Attorney General of Canada has concurrent ability to intervene there. So all the issues about criminal are not the Securities Commission per se, and they are as much a responsibility of the feds as they are of the provinces. So when we look at the numbers, what we find is a story that's very different than the one that is portrayed. If you look in the US, people think about the SEC, but just about every state has a securities agency. They're responsible for 41% of all the enforcement actions in the US, compared to 17% for the SEC. At the end of the day, crime is local. And the people closer are the ones that are much more likely to find it. The other point is that the nature of the industry, of the firms, it would be different. If you're dealing with large firms where insider trading is an important issue, and tipping and so on and so forth, those type of things in the environment, maybe the professionals or whatever. If you're dealing with smaller companies, market manipulation is more important. Okay, so the focus got to be different than if you're trying to enforce. If you have a regulatory body around, okay, what does it do? It runs after the big guys, and the rest doesn't work. So in the US, the states have been so efficient that when they centralized in 1996, they left the states responsibility for the enforcement. And in the last revision, now you've all heard about Obama bringing in the all sort of changes of the financial system. The Dodd-Frank Act has not only confirmed what the states were doing, gave them more power. The SEC just issued last week a regulation. 4,000 investment advisors that were SEC registered are told, get out of here and go back to the states. The state will regulate you. So in essence, in the US, they found out through experience that you're much better to have it locally than try to do it centrally. The other point, which is very important, is that Canada and the US have delegated to self-regulatory agencies, organizations, a lot of regulation of the industry. And that one is Canada-wide. When you look at the ratio of number of enforcements by the SROs in Canada versus the US, you find exactly the same ratio in the public commission, the securities commissions, and public agencies in the US. Same ratio. So Securities Commission not good. Why is it that the industry one is not doing better? Okay, it does point that it's not the architecture here, that there are differences in the market. And one of them, which I will submit is probably a very important factor, is the fact that our industry is concentrated. as one of its good things is that you have uniformity of compliance applications across the country. Whereas if you add 1,000 small businesses, you'll have more chances that they do stupid things. Okay, so that in essence you probably have less infractions in Canada because of that compliance, because of that structure of the industry. In terms of the criminal law, and I'll go fast about it, in essence, in Canada, the constitutional guarantees that we have make it almost impossible to convict somebody of securities or white-collar crime in criminal court. Okay, contrary to the U.S., you cannot compel people to basically not accused to testify. In the U.S., you got the grand jury process, where basically, they're getting evidence that we cannot do in Canada. We don't have the grand jury anymore. So the rules of the game are very, very different. And this ain't going to change with this Federal Securities Act. This is one of the fundamental issues. Now, very rapidly, all that must cost a lot of money. You got routine securities regulation and so on. Here they are different costs. There's the direct costs. There's the costs that are compliance, costs that are induced. And basically, in terms of direct costs, Canada, as a percentage of the number of issuers, is significantly lower, and as a percentage of capitalization, significantly lower than Australia, the UK, or the United States. In terms of the regulatory, the other point which is important is that the Securities Commission have been working very hard to try to harmonize, that is, to standardize across Canada a lot of the stuff. Okay, so the things that need to be Canada-wide, a lot of efforts have been done to do it, and you find that in reporting systems. Our CDOR system in Canada is the equivalent of the SEC EDGAR for reporting issuers, and policies have been harmonized, are basically the same in the provinces and so on. So that in itself has reduced quite significantly the regulatory burden. Now, the studies that have looked at the costs of going public have shown that, in essence, the cost for small firms in Canada is less than in the US, and for large firms is about the same. So basically, at the end of the day, whether you make 13 small checks or one big check, which is the double of the sum of the others, you're better with the 13 small checks than the big check. Okay, and that's the whole argument. The other point is quite interesting, is that TSC publish, what's the cost of going public and so on. So it's about, let's say about $200,000 for an IPO, of which Securities Commission fees are between $1,500 and $10,000. Okay, you don't change a constitutional order for $1,500. Come on.